Now in Belarus, polls are open for tightly controlled parliamentary elections. Longtime leader Alexander Lukashenko placed his vote at a polling station in the capital Minsk, where he also confirmed his intention to run for president in 2025. Dozens of opposition parties have been denied registration for today's election, and one opposition leader, who is in exile, has urged voters to boycott it. 4 parties which support Lukashenko's policies have been granted official registration.
Alexander Lukashenko signs new agreements with his master, Vladimir Putin. The war in Ukraine has seen him seek even closer ties with the Kremlin. Like Putin, Lukashenko portrays his country as being under siege. He accuses the West of plotting to seize power during the elections.
This is not an easy time, but as you can see, things are calm, and I'm sure we can prepare for the elections and then hold them just as calmly.
To ensure that, Lukashenko has stepped up his crackdown on dissent. The only safe place to protest is abroad, like here in neighbouring Lithuania.
In Belarus right now, dozens of political prisoners are held incommunicado. The lives of Nikolai Statkevich, Masha Kolesnikova, Ales Belyatsky, my husband Sergei, and others are now under direct threat. We don't even know if they are alive.
Lukashenko has ruled Belarus for nearly 30 years. All true opposition parties have been dissolved. Only candidates who support the regime are allowed to run for office. Elections here have become just a ritual. The last time Belarus went to the polls was in August 2020. Lukashenko secured a 6th term, in a vote the opposition said was a sham. It triggered a wave of protests and a brutal crackdown. More than 35,000 people were arrested. In these parliamentary elections, the results also seem a foregone conclusion. The only unknown is how those opposed to Alexander Lukashenko will respond.
For more on this, let's bring in Olga Drindova, a political scientist and Belarus analyst at the Research Center for East European Studies. Thanks for joining us, madam. Would you agree with those questioning the credibility of this election?
Well, definitely. I mean, Belarus is a consolidated autocracy. It has become even more consolidated than it used to be before the protest 2020, and the last elections, really free elections, took place there in the 90s. So we definitely do not expect independent candidates. We only have 4 political parties that are still registered. All the others have been dissolved, and those political parties are also loyal to the state. We also do not have actually any international observers being invited to these elections, which is also important. And even in the embassies of Belarus abroad, the Belarusian citizens for the first time are not allowed to cast their vote. So I would not, of course, expect elections to be democratic, but I think the function of these elections is not to show the international world how democratic Belarus is, but to prove to the own state's people working for the state that Lukashenko still has control, power control, and controls the political system of Belarus.
We all remember the massive crackdown on opposition protesters. That was in 2020. What's the situation of the opposition inside Belarus at the moment?
Well, if we talk about classical political opposition, it just doesn't exist in Belarus, and it's actually not possible because all people who have been active, who were able to be active, who wanted to be active, and who were active are now either in jail or had to leave the country and to act from abroad. In general, we can imagine that that there is a certain relation between state and society that has been developed where the state tries to overtake the total control over society and even people's private life. Just to give you one example, even some posts on Facebook or other social nets, posting of photos or even likes, or something like wearing clothes which have white and red color, which is for the state the sign of opposition, can lead and do actually lead to arrest. So people are kind of trying, psychologically to come back to the everyday life in order not to be always upset by the fact that the political changes are not happening.
So, with all of these challenges, is there any way of knowing how much support Lukashenko actually has from the Belarusians?
We do have some figures, but I would be very cautious with them because it's really very unreliable to do such a logical surveys. Consolidated autocracy. So these figures are about 20 to 30%. Once again, we have to be cautious. But I would even say it's not that important because the system that we have now in Belarus is not about the popularity of Lukashenko. It's about the consolidation of the repression apparatus that has been functioning just unfortunately very good in the last years. And it's also about his loyalty or the loyalty of the state's people working for the state structure, the personal loyalty to Lukashenko. So I think this factor of how popular he is in the society, as long as he has enough resources to repress people, unfortunately not very important anymore.
Right. We cannot talk about Belarus without mentioning Russia, right? How much more influence can Russia have when you imagine the future of Belarus?
Definitely very much influence. I would say that the future of Belarus very much critically depends on what happens in the Ukraine, which direction will the war develop. Also, it depends on the internal developments, political developments in Russia, but I would say also in the European Union and in the US, because a lot of support, financial and international and other kinds of support to the democratic forces come from there. I would say that a democratic scenario is not completely excluded, so to say, in case of Belarus when we have the regime change, but as long as the country is critically dependent, the political regime of Lukashenko is critically dependent, both economically and politically, from the regime of Putin, and it has become even more critical after the start of the war in Ukraine and after the introduction of the sanctions of Lopez against Belarus and Russia, it would be very, very difficult to expect some democratic scenarios. And some colleagues in expert circles even talk about the loss of parts of sovereignty of Belarus.
Okay. Belarus analyst Olga Drindova, thank you very much for your time.